countif and sumif. So here's some reasonably realistic but not actually real data on incomes in the US. And we might want to say, well, like, how many people are below a certain level? Like, how many people are below the poverty level, right? So we could say, how many people below, like, $20,000? So I can say countif, and then say, here's the range of stuff I want to deal with. And then I list a criteria like, quote, less than 20,000. It'll probably get upset if you put the dollar sign or the comma in there. And it says 52 out of your people are in that range. And that live updates. So if I put this person's income down to like 10,000, actually these are all randomly generated, so it's hard to tell, but it live updates. So that's countif. And then you can also use sumif, and you can sum the people's incomes who are less than $20,000. But the sum of like 50 people or something, how much is that going to be, right? You'd rather have the average. So they invented something called averageif. It's not in older versions of Excel. You can say averageif, and that'll just average those people that meet the criterion. There's also, you might have seen there's average ifs. So if you want more than one condition, like it has to be less than 20, but I think you can actually have the condition on another column. So if I had data on like gender, you could say if the gender is this and the income is less than this, then average it. So that's just doing it once, and let's notice my condition there, less than 20,000. If I hadn't done less than, if I just said 20,000, well, it's trying to average, and it didn't find anyone, so I said, hey, I divided by 0, right? If I show countif, it's saying no one is at exactly 20,000. So if you're dealing with continuous data, just plain counting, looking for equality is probably not good, unless you have some people in here who are unemployed or you don't have data for them. You might want to count how many people had a 0. So that's the straightforward way to use it. But over here, we're using it in a fancier way to say, let's make a histogram. So I have some bins, like from 0 to 10,000, 10,000 to 20,000, etc. And then I'm using countif to say how many people in my data set are less than or equal to the upper edge of this bin. And there's a new skill there to combine the less than with the value in this cell to form the condition. So the way you do that is you put an ampersand, and that like sticks two things together, not arithmetic, not adding them, but just concatenating them. So this counts how many people are below 30,000. Now that includes people who are below 20,000 and below 10,000. So over here, you can subtract two adjacent values to get the people who are just in that new bin. So that's countif, and you can do averageif. Let's see, total income in that. Okay, so that's countif and averageif.
Can you explain what that countif is doing?
Okay, so it's saying look in range A, and so that's another neat trick. If I want to say like A10 to A400 or whatever, but I think someone might add more data later on, I can just say A:A, and that does the entire column. So if someone does add more data later on, it's automatically included. The danger there is it includes stuff up here, and that's okay if it's just words, but if I put like, let's put something huge, right? Actually, that only got counted once, but if it was averaging, then that would way throw off the average. Okay, so that's saying count stuff in this column, and then the criteria I want to have is that it has to be less than or equal to 10,000. So I'm instead of just typing literally less than or equal to 10,000, I would have to type on the next row. So if I did this, right, that's really what I'm trying to say here. But on the next row, I don't want to have to literally type 20,000 and then type 30,000 on the next row. So instead of typing it, I'm using the value that's already there and combining that with this to make something that ends up being less than or equal to 10,000. Okay. So that's countif. Sumif, actually let's do some like, what do I want to do here? Let's just generate some random data. Let's say like 80% of the people in our data set are citizens. So now if I want to say, well, what about just citizens? So I could say equals, let's do averageif. And now there's three options. The range of stuff I want to check, which would be citizens. The criteria I want to check it for, maybe one, just the citizens. And then, what are the actual numbers I want to be averaging together? The incomes. So you can have the criteria be about a different column than the stuff you're actually averaging together. So this is actually kind of a baby step toward making a pivot table, right? Summarize this column by this column. All right, that's sumif and countif and averageif.